Hi, my name's Campbell. Welcome to my quick introduction to altered tunings. In this lesson, we're just going to have a really brief look at how altered tunings work. We're not going to go into depth, but hopefully it'll give you a better understanding of how you get from one tuning to another tuning without confusing you too much. To start off with, guitars are tuned in what we call standard tuning. Now in this tuning, we have an E at the top, an A next, that's the 5th string up, D next, then a G, then a B, and then an E. Now the reason that we use that tuning is kind of just to do with convenience. Most of the chords that you play are going to have a fairly easy position in that tuning. Most of the scales that you play are going to have a fairly easy position in that tuning. It allows you to play most things, most of the time, pretty easily. But it doesn't give you some of the options that altered tunings can. So for example, we're limited to a bass E as the lowest note. That is the first thing we're going to look at. If we drop down the bass E string to a D, now if you think about the musical alphabet here, the musical alphabet goes from A to G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If we're dropping down from an E, we're going to go down to the next note, which is a D. Makes sense, going down to a D. And to do that, we just drop the tuning peg down. We're going to use the D string as a reference here, so that's the 4th string up, the D string. We're going to play that, and we're going to play the bass E, and we're going to drop the E down. And gradually they're going to come into tune. Now I describe this as when you go cross-eyed, everything doubles, and as you get close to them being in tune, you can hear they're very close, but they're not quite in tune. It's almost like a blurred image with 2 people in. And then as you bring it into tune, it sounds like everything comes into focus, and you've just got one note left, which will be the D. Now I'm going to go one step further here. I'm going to actually tune down a tiny bit more, so they're in tune now, but I'm going to go down a tiny bit more, and then I'm going to come back up to the notes, like so. Now the reason I do that is because the tuning peg, the mechanism inside, actually has a bit of give in it, well, not necessarily on all guitars, but it's certainly a possibility. So if you tune down and you just stop when you get to the note, there's still a little bit of give, and it might drop a tiny bit out of tune. So if you go down a bit further and then come back up, it locks the mechanism in place so that it's just going to stay in tune a bit more reliably. Now I'm not sure if that's true of all guitar tuning mechanisms, but I've always done that, so I just stick with that, and it seems to work fairly well. Especially if you're doing lots of different tunings and the guitar's got to cope with them throughout a set. It's a good way of making sure that it stays pretty much in tune. Right, now we've got that drop down to a D. A couple of things this is going to allow you to do. Obviously, we've got a lower bass note now. Rather than being an E, this is a D. And the E that we had before, the normal bass E, is actually at the 2nd fret now. So that's what the open note used to be. And then if we go off now, we've got the open bass D. An effect of that is that when you play a standard power chord, now that would be played like that normally, so that's 3rd fret, 5th fret, 5th fret, E, A, D. But because we've tuned that down, it's no longer an E, it's a D, so that power chord will be played like this. You can just bar straight across, 5th fret, 5th fret, 5th fret. Now that allows you to play power chords in a really simple way, even with one finger, if you can do it. And it means that you don't have to do a bit of stretch there, so it allows you to do other things, get other notes in there, and also it's just more convenient. If you're hammering on or pulling off, you can pretty much get to a power chord just with one finger without too much trouble. So it's really handy in songs where you're doing lots of other stuff, percussive stuff, things like that. And often you'll find that people playing these techniques are using altered tunings. Now the next thing we're going to do is drop down one of the other strings. We're going to drop down the B string, which is the 2nd string from the bottom, and that's going to go down to an A. Now think about the musical alphabet again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We know that A comes before B, so we just have to drop down in pitch to the A, and we're going to use the A string, the 5th string up, as a reference. So we've got the B string there, A string there, bring them down the same way as before, just tuning down the B string, and then go a tiny bit further and bring it back up. Next string we're going to try is tuning down the bottom E string just here, and that's going to drop down to a D as well, same as the top E string did. we're going to use the 4th string up, the D string, as a reference for that. Play that note, drop down, tiny bit further, and then come back up to the note. Now the tuning I've got here is D-A-D, G-A-D. So it's D from the top, A, D, G, A, D. This is sometimes abbreviated when people are talking into DADGAD. So you find lots of other tunings like that, D-A-D, F sharp A-D, D-A-D, F-A-D, and they all sound slightly different. They're all going to have slightly different notes in and slightly different intervals because of that. If you're going to be doing a lot of tuning, it's probably worth getting hold of a tuner. The best kind of tuner to get would be a chromatic tuner if you don't have one already, and the reason for that is that it will actually allow you to play any note and tell you what it is, and that's really handy if you're going through different older tunings, because you might not necessarily know what the note is you've tuned to, or you might put down your guitar, forget what it was tuned in. So a chromatic tuner is really handy. You can just tune the guitar to itself in the way that we have done, using reference notes around the place. It's not actually the best way to do it. It would be better to use harmonics or take multiple reference points. The reason is that's slightly complicated, but suffice it to say, if you can take a reference from a tuner, it's probably going to be a bit more accurate, and then you can fine-tune it with harmonics if you know how to do that. Now, other ways of doing this would be to use a piano or another instrument. Something with a fixed pitch is really good, so if you've got a keyboard, that's going to be handy because it's always going to be constant, and you can get to pretty much any note, any pitch, just by plonking your finger down and then tuning your guitar to that. Alter tunings are really, really fun. You can get lots of different effects, you can get all kinds of different sounds, and it's a really good way of starting to write songs. You often find that if you drop down into a tuning, for example, I'm just going to go into one now, which is slightly complicated, so I won't explain it, but this is a tuning that I just experimented with, and I found that it had really nice harmonics. And I actually built a song just around that tuning. So I started off thinking, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And I thought, how can I use that in a song? And I just started messing around, and suddenly a whole song had built up. Didn't take very long at all. And that's one of the beauties of using these tunings. You can come up with things that you wouldn't have ever thought of just by the sound that you're getting from a tuning. It can kind of just inspire you to do something slightly different. Now I recommend going and checking out some other players who use alter tunings. There's all kinds of people around, so the obvious ones, you've got Roche uses DADGAD a lot, Thomas Leeb uses all kinds of alter tunings, Akaskero, one of his songs, which I recommend checking out, I'll put it in the links box on the side. And that uses alter tuning very similar to the one we just looked at. And then there are loads of other people. You've got Andy Mckee, Antonio Forcioni, all the Michael Hedges stuff. He used lots of different tunings. And then you've got people who use guitars which even have more strings. So Pat Metheny with his Picasso guitar, and then Doan who plays harp guitar. And they use different tunings as well. So you've got more strings and different tunings. There's just an infinite number of combinations to come up with. Even on a 6-string guitar, you have a huge number of combinations. So I recommend just having an experiment. If you've got 2 guitars, leave one of them in standard tuning, and that way you can just have one of your guitars as an experimental guitar. If not, just learn to tune really, really well. Good luck. See you next time.